I mean, he must have hated his sister-in-law because he wrote The Queen of the Night for her.
In 1970, Beverly Sills was the biggest opera star in America, except at the one place that mattered most. The Metropolitan Opera kept hiring European singers while ignoring her completely. People whispered about secret meetings and backstage politics. Then Sills did something dangerous on national television. She called them out publicly. What happened next was brutal. Threatening letters arrived at her home. Her son attempted suicide while she was performing overseas. The delay wasn't just career sabotage, it nearly destroyed her family. The real reason would stay hidden for 20 years. Belle Miriam Silverman was born in Brooklyn in 1929. Her parents had come from Ukraine and Romania, escaping hard times, hoping for something better in America. They didn't speak much English at home. Little Belle grew up speaking Yiddish, Russian, Romanian, French, and English. Everyone in the neighborhood called her Bubbles. That name would follow her for the rest of her life. When she was just 3 years old, something incredible happened. She sang a little jingle on a radio show called Uncle Bob's Rainbow House. Her high notes were so perfect that engineers had to add a flashing red light to warn when she hit a peak. She earned $10 per episode, which was a lot back then. Listeners loved her so much, they mailed in bubblegum wrappers with her name on them. By 1935, her mother had saved over 700 wrappers. People started calling her Bubble Girl Silverman. Then one Christmas, the name Beverly Sills showed up on a radio poster. It sounded less Jewish, more showbiz, but it was still her. At just 7 years old in 1936, she entered a talent contest and sang The Mockingbird, faster and higher than anyone had heard. She won $50 in gold coins and landed a small role in a short film. When she sang a note so high that it shattered a prop wine glass, the crew had to redo the entire dinner scene. She was hired to tour with Major Bose's vaudeville company for $75 a week, 3 times what most grown-ups earned during the Depression. Between 1937 and 1940, Little Bubbles crisscrossed America. She sang in 27 states, performed 142 one-night shows, and slept just a few hours a night. Every morning was a train station, every day a rehearsal, every evening a stage. She got fined $25 if she missed a note. Her age was faked to get past child labor laws. Her schoolwork was mailed from trains, marked urgent. She sang through power outages and coal dust and made nearly $4,000 in 3 years. But after all the fees, her family only saw about $400. For years, she kept singing, but her big opera break took time. For a long while, nobody could agree on when her real debut happened. Some said it was 1947, but later they found out the true date was Valentine's Day 1951 in Philadelphia. She sang for just $15 that night. That tiny paycheck barely paid for her train ride. The mistake about her debut ended up in encyclopedias, biographies, even her own book. In 1955, she finally got a big part with the New York City Opera. She sparkled on stage, but backstage, she earned just $50 while the older singers made hundreds. She had to type resumes for other singers just to keep her rent paid. From 1951 to 1952, she went on another brutal tour across 63 cities. She performed almost every night, lost 18 pounds, and got bronchitis. Sometimes the orchestra had to play from the stage, and she had to sing from the aisles so people could hear her. But she never stopped. In 1958, she had a chance to audition for the Metropolitan Opera, a dream she'd held her whole life. But she turned it down to stay loyal to City Opera. That same year, she starred in The Ballad of Baby Doe, and the critics loved her. It made her a star. The Met's director mocked her company, calling it the Bronx of opera. But she became a national favorite anyway. In 1956, she married Peter Greeno, a journalist from a wealthy Boston family. But neither side of the family approved. His family didn't like that she was Jewish. Her family didn't like that he wasn't. One of her aunts even mailed her a torn prayer shawl. His mother skipped the wedding. They nearly split up the next year, but everything changed after their first child was born. Her daughter Meredith was born in 1959, but by late 1960, doctors discovered she was deaf. They suggested sending her to an institution, but Sills said no. She stopped working for 8 months and taught Meredith herself every single day. She wrote in her diary that it nearly broke her. She couldn't sing without crying, but Meredith learned to lip read and communicate thanks to her mother's dedication. That heartbreak made Sills a lifelong fighter for children with disabilities. Then came a second blow. Her son, Peter Jr., was born in 1961. He had seizures, developmental delays, and later they learned he had autism and epilepsy. Doctors said he would never speak. She kept working, singing long operas by day, staying up with him through seizures at night. In 1967, after one terrifying emergency, she finally had to place him in a special care center. She called it the hardest decision of her life. She felt like she was signing away a piece of her heart, but she still gave everything to the stage. In 1966, she begged for the role of Cleopatra in Giulio Cesare. On opening night, she sang 64 high E-flats, and even threw in a cartwheel that made the chorus burst out laughing. She got a 17-minute ovation. Time magazine put her on the cover in February 1967. She was 37. After years of being overlooked, she suddenly had offers from all over the world. She kept pushing herself, maybe too hard. In 1968, when she performed Manon, she added playful touches that made audiences love her even more. But that role strained her voice. She needed cortisone shots to keep going. Doctors later found early damage on her vocal cords. Her peak years didn't last long. The pressure had taken a toll. Around 1963, between her 2 children, she faced another crisis. She became pregnant again but developed dangerous toxemia. Doctors warned she could lose her voice or even die. At a time when abortion was mostly illegal, she had to go through a hospital board to get approval. She used her real name, Belle Silverman, and didn't talk about it for 20 years. When she finally wrote about it in 1987, she said it was one of many hard choices working mothers had to face. In April 1969, Beverly Sills stood on the stage of La Scala in Milan. The audience booed her the moment she appeared. That theater was known for being brutal to outsiders, and she was an American trying to sing Italian opera, but she didn't flinch. When she started to sing, everything changed. Her voice soared, and her power filled the hall. By the end of the night, she got 18 curtain calls and a gold bracelet from the toughest fans in the theater. They called her the Phoenix of Brooklyn. Overnight, her pay more than doubled, and new offers from places like Covent Garden and Vienna came pouring in. The same man who once said she wasn't good enough for his theater sent a cable saying she had conquered Milan. But barely a year later, everything nearly ended. In October 1970, while rehearsing in Dallas, Beverly felt something was wrong with her voice. It felt like sandpaper in her throat. Doctors found 2 nodules on her vocal cords. She feared it was over. She wrote goodbye letters the night before surgery, afraid she might never sing again. The surgery was quick, just 28 minutes, but the silence that followed lasted months. She wasn't allowed to speak, not even whisper, for 6 weeks. Then she spent a full year away from the stage. That silence cost her more than $350,000 in lost performances. But she used that time to learn sign language so she could talk to her daughter, who was born deaf. She also silently studied her roles, mouthing every word until her diction became sharper than ever. When she came back in 1974, she did something nobody expected. She decided to sing all 3 of Donizetti's Tudor queens in just 14 weeks. These roles were difficult and dangerous for her voice. Doctors warned she could damage her cords again, but she was determined. She lost 12 pounds and didn't speak at all on days she had to perform. Critics were amazed at how quickly she could switch From one queen's sorrow to another's fury. The trilogy of operas wasn't meant to go together, but after she did it, the public forever saw them as a set. The tickets sold out completely, and the season became the biggest financial success in her company's history. At home, though, Beverly's life was falling apart. Her daughter Meredith, born in 1970, was profoundly deaf. Her son Peter Jr., born in 1972, had severe autism. Her husband, Peter Greeno, was overwhelmed. In 1971, he left for 3 months and lived in Boston alone. They started marriage counseling in November that year. Beverly thought about quitting opera to take care of her children full-time. She did the math, comparing what she could earn on stage to what her children needed for life. Therapists told her to put her pain into her performances. In January 1972, people noticed something new in her acting. There was more sadness, more depth. Later that year, Peter left his job and moved back to New York, calling himself Mr. Mom to a queen bee. Beverly said that struggle made her a better actress. In March 1972, Time magazine put her on the cover and called her America's Queen of Opera. It should have been a celebration. Instead, hate mail flooded her office. Over 300 letters called her fake, saying the real divas were in Europe. One letter even had red inked clippings with the words, "Blood on your high seas." The police traced some letters back to a bitter coach who didn't get hired. No one was arrested, but while the threats were real, so was the publicity. Ticket calls jumped by nearly half, and her record sales exploded. On The Tonight Show, she joked that she was now the most talked-about punching bag in opera, and that humor turned the fear into fame. Finally, in April 1975, at age 45, Beverly stepped onto the stage of the Metropolitan Opera. She sang the same Rossini opera that had made her famous in Milan. The show ended with an 18-minute standing ovation, the longest for a debut since World War II. Critics praised her top notes, though some whispered that her voice was starting to fray in the middle. What the audience didn't know was that Beverly had been sick with laryngitis and pushed through using aspirin and sheer willpower. But it worked. The applause lasted so long, she earned a $10,000 bonus that had been written into her contract as a joke. Then came the night television brought her into millions of homes. In December 1976, she sang Lucia di Lammermoor live on national TV in color. She added a few extra high notes to outshine a legendary recording by Joan Sutherland. Over 9 million people watched. Some critics called it brilliant. Others said they could hear the strain. The morning after, doctors gave her cortisone to calm her swollen cords so she could film more scenes for a PBS special. Television made her more famous, but also pushed her voice to its limits. In May 1977, she released a crossover album that mixed Mozart, show tunes, and even a disco version of a famous opera aria. It sold more than 100,000 copies in just a few weeks, the fastest ever for an American soprano. But then came a scandal. A Canadian singer accused Beverly of stealing her unique vocal flourishes from a 1962 broadcast. The record label quietly settled the case for $25,000 and changed the credits. The warm, wholesome image that Beverly had built took a small hit, but it showed just how intense and competitive classical music had become. On July 23, 1977, Beverly's mother died of cancer. Her mother had been her teacher and her anchor. Beverly was devastated. Still, she didn't cancel any shows. 66 days later, she was back on stage singing La Traviata. She wore a locket filled with her mother's hair, and during one scene, she sobbed so deeply the audience could hear it. Critics said it was the most emotional performance of her life. The box office surged as people came not just for the music, but to witness her grief turned into art. By 1978, the toll was becoming clear. A major article in the New York Times questioned whether Beverly was still in top form. Her range had dropped. Her breath control had weakened. But she didn't slow down. In 1972, everyone thought Beverly Sills would finally perform at the Metropolitan Opera after Sir Rudolph Bing stepped down. But 3 whole seasons passed, and still no invitation. The official reason was scheduling problems, but people inside the Met said something else. They said some staff, who were loyal to Bing, didn't want Sills there. They thought she was too flashy, too famous on TV, and too Brooklyn. The tabloids in New York couldn't get enough of the drama. They printed photos of Italian stars the Met hired, while Sills stood outside City Opera signing autographs. Even though she was ignored, she didn't slow down. She sang 57 times in 18 cities. People started calling her America's diva, who didn't have America's opera house. It became a joke, but not to Sills. Then came February 26, 1973. On national television, Sills called out the Met for favoring European stars and ignoring Americans, even though the opera got public money. That one sentence exploded. 5 newspapers ran it on their front page. The Met's phone lines got over 300 calls, half praising her, half furious. But the worst part came later. She got threatening letters. One said, "Stay at your little city opera or join Caruso in heaven." She kept it quiet, but an FBI memo from 1978 showed they even interviewed her after she received a bullet casing in the mail from her old Brooklyn neighborhood. The Met only gave a dull statement about manners, but ticket sales for her city opera shows jumped 18% in just 1 week. Behind all that noise, her private life shattered. On June 13, 1974, while she was performing La Traviata in Venice, her son, Muffy, who had cerebral palsy, tried to take his own life. He was only 15. Beverly rushed home to Long Island Jewish Hospital, canceling 3 sold-out performances. In letters to her close friend Edgar Vincent, she wrote that if she'd been working at the Met, she would have been home every night. She believed the delay cost her more than a career milestone. It nearly cost her her son. She later demanded only New York-based contracts and even thought about quitting, but her son survived. And years later, he would smile with pride watching her finally sing at the Met in 1975. That same year, in October, a New York Magazine article said that back in 1970, Bing had written 2 commercial next to Sills's name on a casting sheet. That note, people believed, had blacklisted her. But in 1991, during a New York Times interview, he admitted the truth. He said not hiring Sills was the biggest mistake of his career. That one line appeared in newspapers around the world. It confirmed what fans already suspected. The decision wasn't about art, it was about control. One opera critic joked that it took Bing 21 years to say what every cab driver already knew. By then, Beverly had become a symbol of a star, held back by the elite, a story she would use to fight for access to the arts. When the Met finally invited her in 1975 to sing Rossini's The Siege of Corinth, Sills didn't make it easy. She said she wanted top billing, equal to Joan Sutherland's name on the posters. That kind of demand was almost unheard of for someone who had never performed there. When they said no, she walked away. The newspapers went wild. One headline read, "Diva Showdown on Broadway." 8 weeks before opening night, the Met gave in. Beverly's name would appear alone above the title. Her face would be on all the posters. She'd be paid $7,500 per show, a record at the time. On April 7, 1975, she stepped onto the Met stage. The crowd gave her an 18-minute ovation, the longest since Maria Callas in 1956. The same opera house that once ignored her was now celebrating her, proving that Sills had become exactly what they once said she wasn't: prestige. But the praise didn't last long. The very next day, October 12, 1975, a New York Times piece titled "Beverly Sills, Media Heroine or Genuine Superstar" questioned if she really belonged. The article said her voice had suffered, that her high notes were shaky, and that all the TV shows and magazine covers were just smart marketing. It said the Met Gala that week might expose a weak voice hidden by glitter and charm. The article hit right before her biggest night. The paper's phones lit up. Fans wrote angry letters. One even called the critic a sexist Judas. That same piece also accused her of faking her backstory. It said, "The rags to riches tale" about a poor Brooklyn girl selling soap jingles to pay for lessons wasn't true. It claimed her father actually owned several buildings and wasn't poor at all. Her manager threatened to sue the newspaper. City Opera officials were furious. Letters flooded in, calling the article an attack on the American dream. Some were written in glitter and green ink. One said the critic was just jealous of a woman's success, but not everyone sided with her. Some agreed with the article, saying the fame had gone too far. The moment showed a clear divide: those who loved her for bringing opera to everyone, and those who thought she'd sold out the art. Still, Beverly kept her dignity. When critics complained about her shaky high notes during her Met run, she quietly told the Met to send all her $2,500 per night earnings to charity. She didn't want any fanfare, but when March of Dimes listed her as an anonymous donor at its 1976 gala, people found out. She had given all $20,000 to children with birth defects. She had always supported these causes because both her children were born with disabilities. That one act softened even her harshest critics. People stopped talking about her voice and started calling her the singer who sang for sick kids. In March 1979, just before he had a stroke, Rudolph Bing gave a radio interview in London. He finally said it out loud. Snubbing Beverly Sills had been his greatest mistake. He said it cost the Met millions in goodwill and haunted him personally. He said the public loves an underdog, and he had handed her that role. The interview aired only once, but the quote spread everywhere. It confirmed that the feud wasn't just about music, it had always been personal. On October 27, 1980, Sills gave her farewell performance at City Opera in a show called Bubbles and Friends. It looked joyful on stage, but behind the scenes, she was hiding something serious. Just 3 months earlier, she had gone through surgery to remove suspected ovarian cysts near the spot where she'd had cancer in 1974. Doctors cleared her to sing just 11 days before the show. She kept a syringe for pain backstage, but still hit every high note. Even her conductor didn't know the full story until she wrote it in a Christmas card. Just weeks later, on January 1, 1981, she became the general director of City Opera and found a huge surprise. The company wasn't just in trouble, it was $5 million in debt. She cut out luxury events, added English super titles to make operas more accessible, and even brought in Stephen Sondheim's musical Sweeney Todd. Purists said she was turning the opera into Broadway, but it worked. By 1983, City Opera had a $3 million surplus and 42.2% more people were coming to shows. The same crowd-friendly style that once got her rejected had now saved an entire opera company. The final truce came in 1991 when she joined the Met's board. That moment ended 3 decades of drama, but there was a secret catch. She had to agree never to criticize any Met casting and never to perform again, not even for a gala. She agreed and joked that her high C belonged in a museum. This deal only came to light in 2012 when her papers were unsealed. It showed that peace had come, but only by making sure the feud would never return. Then came the most painful irony. On June 28, 2007, doctors told 78-year-old Beverly that she had advanced lung cancer. She had never smoked a day in her life. 4 days later, she died. She had planned to host PBS's July 4th broadcast, but never made it. Doctors later said the cancer came from decades of secondhand smoke in opera houses and TV studios. In the 1950s and 60s, air systems didn't filter out cigarette smoke. They just recirculated it. Friends remembered her asking TV producers in 1971 to stop smoking cigars on set. They refused. Her death shocked the arts world. Within 6 months, Lincoln Center banned indoor smoking. The Met installed a $1.8 million filtration system in her honor. She became a posthumous symbol for non-smokers who still paid the price. In 2009, When her estate sent over 1,000 marked-up vocal scores to the New York Public Library, archivists found something hidden inside one of the books. Tucked between the pages were 74 letters from 1960 to 1985. They told the true story of her family. Her daughter Meredith had been born deaf and later developed multiple sclerosis. Her son, Peter Jr., lived with autism. In a 1963 letter to Bing, she said she was thinking about quitting because she couldn't juggle opera runs and her son's needs. Another letter from 1978 revealed a bitter fight with Joan Sutherland over a TV appearance. She wrote that Sutherland wanted the Muppet Show like it was Covent Garden. Those letters also showed her quietly working with CBS to create an autism telethon. 7 years before such things even existed, her polished image had always hidden the chaos she lived with. But in those letters, the truth came out. She was a strategist, balancing pain, pressure, and performance. But her biggest stage became fundraising. From 1972 to 1994, she led the Mother's March for the March of Dimes and helped raise the equivalent of $146 million. On January 30th, 1983, she hosted an NBC special in full Cleopatra costume and raised $8.4 million in one night. She once called Ford's CEO from rehearsal and said if she could hit a high note at 9 a.m., he could hit $1 million by noon. By 1990, she had convinced Congress to match private donations dollar for dollar. Her work helped fund new tests for newborn hearing loss and launched the Sills Family Resource Center for Autism in 1992. She even auctioned off her designer gowns to raise money. Her final recital at Carnegie Hall sold out in 36 minutes.